Good day, we are the Group 3 and we are here to discuss Module 20, which is all about national issues like corruption and poverty, inefficiencies in office, and educational systems. We will tackle these issues one by one to see the real picture of these problems facing today. We will also be learning how these problems affect the delivery of government services, which in turn prevents the growth of the economy. Before we proceed to the discussion, here are our learning targets. First, describe the causes and effects of corruption and poverty. Second, describe the concept of inefficiency in the office and educational system in the Philippines by levels. So, what is corruption? Corruption is a form of dishonesty or criminal offense undertaken by a person or organization entrusted with a position of authority to acquire illicit benefit or abuse power for one's private gain. When we say corruption, the first word that maybe pop up in your mind is government, as it has been a problem for a very long time inside and outside politics, as it is a significant obstacle to good governance in the Philippines, and it is simply defined as a violation of norms of conduct or professional obligation because it is illegal behavior by powerful people. There are lots of ways to conduct corruption. The following are the common types. First is bribery. It is an illegal or unethical gift bestowed to influence the recipient's conduct. It may be money, goods, rights in action, and property. Second, embezzlement. It is when a person uses funds for a different purpose than they were intended to be used. For example, government funds are used for the personal expenses of a government employee. Third is graft, which is the same as embezzlement. It occurs when funds intended for public projects are intentionally misdirected to maximize the benefits to private interests. And lastly, extortion. It is unlawful exaction of money or property through intimidation or threats and violence. They use threats like death threats and bomb threats to obtain assets. The best illustration of corruption in the national issue is political corruption. What is political corruption? It occurs when an office holder or other governmental employee acts in an official capacity for personal gain. It is simply the abuse of public power, office, or resources by elected government officials by extortion, soliciting, or offering bribes. It can also take the form of office holders maintaining themselves in office by purchasing votes by enacting laws that use taxpayers' money. For an in-depth knowledge of corruption, let us move on with the causes of corruption, which are greed for personal gain, lack of personal morals, low awareness of the issues, lack of transparency, and weak regulations and monitoring. Let me discuss it one by one for us to apprehend it. First is greed for personal gain. It is the selfishness of an individual to obtain as much personal wealth as possible. It is often at the expense of other individuals and even businesses. We all know that greed defines as excessive desire, and greed for personal gain is the best description of corruption. Just because of greediness in power and money, anyone, especially politician, tends to do unlawful actions for their self-interest, political interest, and business interest that may benefit them for a long time. Second, lack of personal morals. It is stated that people know what good behavior is, but they choose to misbehave and forget their integrity. Whether we accept it or not, corruption makes people evil, as they set aside their morals and good customs for the sake of wealth and power. They became immoral as they make decisions that purposely violate a moral agreement and a professional obligation. On the other hand, we must remember that if individuals uphold good moral values, they will be aware of the consequences of their action and refrain from indulging in such acts. But if not, it results in toxic values for employees.
Low awareness of the issues. It shows fraud as the employer commits an intentional offense against the employee for failing to conduct an action or training. But because the latter are unaware of the signs of criminal activity, they cannot report it. It explains that employers are more likely to incur an offense if they neglect to provide employee ABC training. This is due to staff members' ignorance of the implication of their conduct. All employers are required by law to train their employees. Furthermore, if staff are unable to detect symptoms in illicit conduct, they are unable to report it. As a result, corrupting behavior goes unnoticed, allowing crooks to get away with it. Furthermore, failure to disclose information might be considered a crime under ABC law, such as Bribery Act 2010. Next is lack of transparency. Lack of transparency in particular creates high vulnerability for corruption. It often comes in the form of underhand government deals with or threatening press freedoms and dishonesty. It explains that people will be more offended if a government or company develops a climate in which corruption condoned and routine. This frequently manifests itself in form of shady political transactions or threats to press freedoms. Furthermore, this occurs in the context of an organization where a lack of compliance can promote poor behavior. Next is weak regulations and monitoring. Corruption is a threat to businesses and societies alike. It damages economies and reputations, and weak monitoring system make it much harder to catch criminals. It explains that corruption endangers both businesses and societies. It harms economies and corporation reputations. Corruption occurs when a person abuses a public office of power solely for personal benefit. Bribery, fraud, and identity theft are all examples of corrupt behavior. As a result, ineffective monitoring systems make it considerably more difficult to apprehend criminals. As a result, as all we know, criminals will first target the poorest countries and enterprises. For example, if a bank has a reputation for having lax transaction fledgling producers, criminals are more likely to use their accounts to transfer unlawful funds. What is poverty? For another national issue, there is poverty that mostly caused by corruption. To better understand it, let's define poverty. Poverty is not having enough material possessions or income for a person needs. Poverty may include social, economic, and political elements. Absolute poverty is the complete lack of means necessary to meet basic personal needs such as food, clothing, and shelter. It explains that poverty is about not having enough money to meet basic needs including food, clothing, and shelter. However, poverty is much more than just having enough money. Poverty is the state of having few material possessions or little income. Poverty can have diverse social, economic, and political causes and effects. Causes and effects of poverty. Number 1. Poorest people work in agriculture and live in areas prone to natural disasters. Number 2. Inadequate number of available good jobs, lesser opportunities. 3. Lack of education. 4. Unable to afford foods and clean water. Last, lack of access to healthcare. And more causes of poverty: inequality and marginalization, conflict, hunger, malnutrition and stunting, litter or no access to clean water, sanitation and hygiene, climate change, poor public works and infrastructure. Why is poverty a problem in the Philippines? The country remains trapped in poverty, and more are falling into extreme poverty. It is because of poor governance and rampant corruption which result in poor planning and economic downfall. In addition, significant causes are low economic growth, increased population rate, high inequality volume. It explains that Filipinos are having a hard time surviving in such difficult conditions, and more are falling into extreme poverty. According to the Asian Development Bank, the significant causes of poverty include low economic growth, a weak agricultural sector, increased population rates, and a high inequality volume.
So now let's talk about inefficiency in the office. First, what is inefficiency in the office? It means being unable to do the job required and not producing results in the best, quickest, and cheapest way. It causes more than just slow progress and wasted salary and time. It means you're not able to do the job in your best, quickest, and cheapest manner. It causes more than just a loss of time and wasted of money or salary. Let's proceed to the effects of inefficiency. Inefficiency directly impacts productivity, which is inextricably linked to the all-important element of employee morale. When offices are inefficient and people they feel they cannot do good work for reasons beyond their control, it wears down their morale and thus their productivity. This hopelessness and inability to make an impact leads to worse and worse work, creating a dangerous downward spiral that's hard to break out of. But it doesn't have to be that way. Let's, let's explore how important inefficiency is to the office, productivity, and morale, and all the tactics you need to know to improve inefficiency and build an upward spiral of productivity and positivity. Various studies and theories have established that employees who are happy with their organization's environment are more productive and thus high in morale. If the person is working in a happy organization environment or not toxic environment, they tend to work hard to produce their produce their product in a good or best way. Causes of inefficiency. If you notice any of the following practices or problem at your office, they could be what's causing inefficiency that hurt productivity and overall morale. 1. Outdated processes and tools. If your office is suffering from outdated processes and tools that may undoubtedly be the cause of inefficiency that hamper efficiency, effectiveness, and are downright annoying to boot. If your office is still printing and mailing valuable invoices, using emails to collect signatures for important contracts, or developing complex and time-consuming workarounds for your departmental technology, then you've got a physical task that need to go digital. Manual measures that should really be automated, and tools that lag behind the times. If your office are suffering from that, it may cause inefficiency because if the organization is providing the tools and processes, easy processes that the employee need, they will work hard because their company or organization care for them, or how will they do their work. Number 2, unnecessary checks and balances. Checks and balances are an excellent precautions when the stakes are very high. However, if you have 3 different employees take time out of their leave days to sign off a vacation rest form, that's probably unnecessary. These redundancies, sometimes planned and oftentimes not planned, tend to develop as an organization increases in size and individual employee lose autonomy and ownership. If your employees are asking for the leave, when 3 of them are asking for the leave, it may cause inefficiency because the employees are not complete and the work will be lacking because no one will be able to do the work because he or she is on the leave.
The next thing that causes inefficiency in office is poorly managed meetings. Meetings themselves are not the enemy of efficiency. Poor management creates slow productivity and morale. A meeting that is poorly managed causes office inefficiency that slows down productivity because employees tend to feel unproductive when their surrounding is in a bad shape. Having no one to manage them or them being not managed properly would lead to fruitless work since they don't have something to follow up to. The next one is office distractions. Noises reverberating through an office, constant emails and notifications, distractions abound in the modern office setting. One of the things that motivates employees to do better is a peaceful and stress free place. If they kept on working in an office full of distractions, there is a possibility that they will be irritated or annoyed, hence distracted. And if the employees are distracted, their attention span will be tested along with their patience. They may feel unproductive because they may not be able to complete a task properly. The last thing on the list is the moral damaging culture. Culture has a significant impact on business productivity and morale. An efficient office is challenging to build when your organization suffers from the hallmarks of poor culture like ineffective or toxic leadership, unwillingness, and lack of mobility. Leaders who fail to address moral issues in the workplace will put the office at risk. Problems will arise such as decreased productivity and a higher chance of conflicts in the office. Low employee morale affects productivity and performance negatively. The worst thing here is that low employee morale is contagious. Once an employee has a low morale, other employees may adapt to it. Now, let's move on to the next national issue, which is the education system. The education system comprises everything that goes into educating public school students at the federal, state, or community levels. Education system is important because it helps on developing children and also adults' knowledge, talents, and other specialties. It also helps on building character that are acceptable by the society. The reason why it is one of the national issues is because it has been facing a lot of challenges that prohibits it from continuously growing and developing towards the betterment. Also, education is an important thing to be considered as the foundation of our future. Here are the 10 major challenges currently facing in public schools. Number 1 is classroom size. Number 2 is poverty. Number 3 is family factors. Number 4 is technology. Number 5 is bullying. Number 6 is student behavior. Number 7, no child left behind. Number 8 is parent involvement. Number 9 is student health. And number 10 is funding.
Issues regarding the educational system. When it comes to influence, educational system of the Philippines has been affected by the country's colonial history, including the Spanish, American, and the Japanese rule and occupation. Yet, the most influential and deep-rooted contribution arose during American occupation, wherein English was introduced as a primary language of instruction. A public education system was first established, a system specifically patterned after the United States school system. Therefore, similar to the United States of America, the Philippines has had an intensive and extremely inclusive system of education, including features such as higher education. In the present time, Philippine educational system firstly covers 6 years of compulsory education, grade 1 to 6, divided informally into two levels, both composed of 3 years. The first one is primary level and the second one is intermediate level. However, the Philippine education system is intensively been a model for other Southeast Asian countries. In recent years, such a matter is no longer stood true. Such a system had been deteriorated. Such a fact is especially evident and true in the country's more secluded poverty regions. Nationwide, the Philippines face several issues when it comes to educational system. First on the list is the quality of education. In 2014, the National Achievement Test (NAT) and the National Career Assessment Examination result shows that there had been a decline in quality of Philippine education in elementary and secondary level. In a comparison of completion rate in the highly urbanized city, Metro Manila is able to burst a primary school completion rate of approximate 100%. However, the other area of the nation such as Eastern Visayas and Mindanao holds primary school completion rate of only 30% or even less. And this kind of statistic is no surprise in education system in the Philippines. Context. Students were hailed from Philippine urbanized area have a financial capacity to complete a very least their primary school education. The second issue is the budget for education. Although it has been mandated by the Philippine Institution for the Government to allocate the highest portion of its government to education, recently DepEd received 1.37 trillion, yet the Philippines remains to have one of the lowest budget allocation to education among ASEAN countries. Affordability of education. Status. Social economically disadvantaged student, otherwise known as student who are member of high and low income poverty families.
That's one of the reason why parents or part of the family go abroad or being an OFW to give comfort to their family in living as well as in giving them comfortable and to afford education.
Dropout rate. Philippines is the only ASEAN country includes in the top 5 highest dropout rate. According to UNESCO data, over 1.4 million children who are out of school, and DepEd or Department of Education shows the data of 6.38 dropout rate in primary school and 7.82% dropout rate in secondary school. Have immensely higher dropout rates in the elementary level. Additionally, most freshmen student in college level come from relatively well-off families. The price increasing in the basic commodities is one of the reasons why a lot of children is dropping out of school. Mismatch. There is a large mismatch between educational training and the actual job. This stands to be the major issue in tertiary level college, and it is furthermore the cause of continuation of substantial amount of educated yet unemployed or underemployed people. I encounter a lot of this, like there are LPT or teachers who are now in call center. Brain drain is a slang term indicates substantial immigration or moving in a country to another. Because according to them, their salary is higher in call center than continuing on teaching students. This ongoing mass immigration subsequently induct an unparalleled brain drain along grave economic implementation. Additionally, Philippine society putting a bill for education of millions of successively spend their more productive years abroad, or those who for example nurses who go abroad to have more salary in Canada, Australia, like that.
Social divide. Social divide, it is simply illustrates that the social system has made education part of institution mechanism that divides the poor and the rich. Some educational institution creates division between poor and rich. We can see a lot of private school is in much higher level of refinement. They have the access to laboratories and other things that are relevant to school. While the public school, where the majority of poor attends, doesn't have means or access to things they needed. And so it creates social divide wherein the poor and the rich can separate themselves from one another. Lack of facilities and teacher shortages in public school. Due to not enough funds or budget in the education system, the Philippines faced issues like lack of facilities for students and teachers and shortage of teachers as lots of them were going abroad to have a better career and salary. A shortage of teachers harms students, teachers, and public education system as a whole. Lack of sufficient qualified teachers and staff instability threaten students' ability to learn and reduce teachers' effectiveness. And high teacher turnover consumes economic resources that could be better deployed somewhere else. The teacher shortage make it more difficult to build a solid reputation for teaching and to professionalize it. What is the education during the COVID-19 pandemic? Education department sectors are finding ways to implement academic activities while minimizing the infection by online learning, blended learning, and physically going back to school. COVID-19 has also proven that integrated learning is very convenient and flexible for both learners and tutors, which make it safe to assume that online education will eventually become an integral component of the education system. To better understand, let us define learning. So, what is learning? Learning is not something that people can observe firsthand. An important aspect of learning is that it allows you to improve your knowledge and gain skills that will help you to achieve your goals. There are different types of learning and it's very crucial during the pandemic up to now for the sake of teachers and learners. The following are different types of learning. The first one is online learning. Online learning requires infrastructures of TV, computers, laptop, and a stable Wi-Fi connection at home. The term new normal has been widely used since the outbreak. Online learning has become a new standard in education. The COVID-19 outbreak has sparked new learning methods. The new normal is a reinvented education centered on online learning and highly demanded, relevant to the extracurricular activities as well as academic courses. Blended learning. Blended learning is a combination of offline and online education which enables students to interact with the instructor, study material, and other students both through physical classroom and online platforms. The idea of blended education makes learning easy and more productive, which is why
This interpretation of digital learning is promising in the long run and will become the new normal. Flexible learning. Flexible learning involves a balance of power between institution and students. Rather than being required to attend a class, students can choose and allocate their time of learning. This control not only allows them to plan their education around their commitments, but it also ensures that they are learning at the most appropriate time. Active learning. Active learning involves actively engaging students with the course materials through discussion, problem solving, role play, and other methods. Active learning is concerned with how students learn rather than what they learn. Students are encouraged to think deeply rather than passively receiving information from the teacher. According to research, it is not possible to transmit understanding to students by simply telling them. What they need to know is to be aware. Teachers, on the other hand, must ensure that they challenge their students' thinking capacity. Why development of national consciousness is important. It is important as it instrumental to a lively democracy. Developing national consciousness is a continuous process. Participation is the most common and effective method for it. It is important as it takes collective action to address issues of public concern. National consciousness plays an important role in socio-economic and political development in many nations. Mostly, national consciousness promotes national unity, sustainable development, peace, respect for diversity, patriotism, and others.
Again, we are the Group 3, and that's all for Module 20, National Issues, Corruption and Poverty, Inefficiency in Office and Education System. We hope that everyone understands the topic clearly. We provide a short quiz to test everyone's understanding about the lesson. Comprehend every question and choose the best answer.